GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good evening, I am Beth Turner, standing in for Michelle Dewberry this evening. We've got so much to get through. You don't want to go anywhere for the next hour. With me tonight throughout the show, a leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin, Professor of Political Economy and International Relations, Lee Jones, and former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire. All of that to come tonight on Dewbs of Co with me. But first, here is the latest news headlines with Polly.
Beverly, thank you. The top stories this hour. Chelsea FC owner Roman Abramovich and at least 2 Ukrainian peace negotiators are reported to have suffered from what's being called a suspected poisoning. The Wall Street Journal newspaper says the incident happened following a meeting in Kyiv early this month. The US newspaper adds the Russian oligarch suffered symptoms including red eyes, constant and painful tearing, and peeling skin on his face and hands. Meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has said Vladimir Putin's forces are abducting Ukrainian politicians, activists and journalists as Russia fails to meet its military targets. She called it an abhorrent act, and earlier the UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, appealed for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire to allow for progress in serious political negotiations. Mariupol city's mayor estimates around 160,000 people are still trapped there without heating or basic needs. And Britain and Australia are joining forces to send humanitarian aid to Ukraine, with the first 2 plane loads heading to Poland tomorrow. The UK has also sent a shipment of British military supplies to bolster NATO's security in the Baltic Sea. Royal Navy vessels brought vehicles and equipment to resupply the battle group currently stationed in Estonia. In other news today, the government has threatened to block P&O Ferries' plan to replace 800 sacked staff with agency workers. The Transport Secretary has told the company a package of measures will be introduced so the company can't pay workers less than the minimum wage. In a letter to the Chief Executive, Grant Shapps said the company would be left with little choice but to reverse its action. The Chancellor has been defending his spring statement, saying it would have been irresponsible for the government to have borrowed more to raise benefits. Giving evidence to the Chairman Treasury Select Committee, Rishi Sunak said raising benefits by the current rate of inflation would have added £25 billion to government borrowing. But the committee chair said the Chancellor had done very little for those who were out of work or relying on benefits.
We had expansive plans to invest in levelling up and public services. We got hit by a pandemic that shrunk the size of the economy, and then we had a choice, right? Then we had a choice, and the choice was, well, should we do austerity and scale back considerably on all those investments in the NHS, in police officers, policing, on levelling up and transport infrastructure, social care, etc., or do we need to raise the money to pay for them? And we've chosen the latter route.
Rishi Sunak. Pupils in England who are at risk of falling behind in core subjects are to be offered targeted support like tutoring sessions. The school's white paper also requires schools to teach for at least 32.5 hours a week by September 2023. Speaking in the Commons, the Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi, said today teachers' starting salary will increase to £30,000 a year, and the department is making a £180 million investment in the early years workforce. He also made a commitment to parents.
All parents want their children to be happy and to grow up to a future that is full of promise. So I'm today making a pledge to parents. It is a pledge from me and from this government via schools to all families. The parent pledge is that any child that falls behind in English or maths will receive timely support to enable them to reach their potential.
Nadine Zahawi there. The Sir David Amess murder trial has been delayed for a week after 3 jurors tested positive for COVID. The defence case for Ali Harbi Ali had been due to start today. He's accused of stabbing the MP to death in October last year. He denies murder and preparing acts of terrorism. Well, as you've been hearing on GB News today, there was quite a drama at the Oscars last night, with the actor Will Smith hitting the host of the show, Chris Rock, during the awards ceremony itself. And it prompted the Academy to post a response today saying it doesn't condone violence of any form. The incident happened when the host made a joke about the actor's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith. And it happened just minutes before Will Smith picked up Best Actor for his role in King Richard. Diana Davidson, MP for Bishop Auckland, reflected on her experience following personal tragedy.
I think it's understandable wanting to defend your loved ones, and actually, in a way, that's very much why I set up this all-party group, because the reason I'm so passionate about this issue is because my own father was killed by a single punch. But there are ways to stand up for what you believe in, to stand up for your loved ones without resorting to violence and without resorting to the sort of act we saw from Will Smith. And that's what I really want to raise awareness of there, that violence is not the answer.
Diana Davis. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you are with GB News. Now back to Dewbs & Co, this time with Bev.
Good evening, this is me, Bev, sitting in for Michelle this evening, and with me until 7 o'clock, I'm delighted to introduce to you my panel. David Curtin, Heritage Party leader, Lee Jones, Professor of Political Economy and International Relations, and Scarlett Maguire, former Labour advisor. I would also want to know your thoughts this evening. Get in touch with me, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or on Twitter at Beverly Turner or at gbnews. And can I also remind you to subscribe to our YouTube page. You can watch live or see the best bits from the channel when you search GB News. There's also the app, of course. I use the app. Do you use the app, guys? Yes, they do, enthusiastically. They told me, Michelle said you're the dream team tonight, so don't let me down. All right, Lee? OK, excellent. Right. OK, Education Secretary Nadeem Zahawi was talking today. He launched his Education White Paper in a bid to improve exam results and to increase from just 65% to 90% the number of children who leave school able to competently read, write and add up. It seems like the least we should expect, isn't it? Zahawi's demands include schools offering a minimum of 32.5 teaching hours per week and extra tutoring to get struggling kids back on track. The Education Secretary also made a pledge to parents. Let's take a look.
The parent pledge is that any child that falls behind in English or maths will receive timely support to enable them to reach their potential. A child's school will let parents know how their child is doing and how the school is supporting them to catch up.
He promises that schools will identify children who need help and provide targeted support when needed, which any teacher will tell you they already do. But isn't there a bigger question about whether our education system is even equipping children with the skills required in a 21st century world? Right, Lee, I might come to you first because you spend your days teaching predominantly. How much of your week is teaching?
Oh, about 40% of my time is
OK. When the students arrive at you, your university level, do they have the skills necessary, do you think, to A, do the academic rigorous work they have to do with you, but also to go into life? Because life isn't just about getting A's in your maths and English, is it?
I'm afraid they don't. I mean, what I have seen in my time teaching at university, and I've been teaching my current university about 13 years, the very first thing I was asked to do when I started was to devise a first-year module designed to help students make the transition to university, because we were finding that there was a bigger and bigger gap between what they were doing at school and what we were trying to do with them at university.
Well, that is so depressing.
And that problem has only worsened in the years since.
So what don't they have? What are they not equipped to deal with? What are you having to fill in the gaps for?
Essentially, secondary education in this country in particular has become an exam factory. Because universities are schools are set targets, and they're measured in league tables for how well they perform. All of the incentives drive teachers to teaching to the test. So everything else gets pushed off the curriculum, and the students are trained in how to jump through the hoops required to get a good mark. They're not trained in the skills of critical thinking, making an argument, independent research. They must be guided, and so they need hand-holding constantly all the way through the process.
My word. Scarlett, what's your reaction to that? Your children are grown up now, they're in their 30s. I've still got 3 who are at high school age, one primary school actually. Tony Blair, education, 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 right? That was his legacy. Is this the result of that 22 years later?
I mean, I know because my children were at secondary school, at London secondary schools, which really improved during Tony Blair's day, and actually came out, went to university and did really well. Actually, I mean, so there's been a problem for a long time. I mean, one would think actually that this was a new government. Actually, the Tories have been in power since for 12 years, but much more. I mean, look at what the pandemic did. I mean, you know, it was nearly a year ago that Sir Kevin Collins said we need this much money to catch up, right? And Rishi Sunak said absolutely not. You can have 10%. And he resigned. I mean, it is a disaster at the moment. And so all this, we're going to target these children. I mean, there are children, I mean, I completely agree with you about exam factories, but I do think there are lots and lots of children who are never going to get near your university. I mean, who really need help, who didn't go to school during the pandemic, weren't helped during the pandemic, didn't have laptops as they were promised during the pandemic. Nothing happened, and now and now we hear, oh yeah, everybody's got to have maths and English. This just isn't true. I mean, that's what is. We're being promised things that actually should have been delivered year after year after year.
Yeah, it seems like a low bar to me, David, when they say we'd like 90% of children to leave school able to read, write, and do maths to a decent standard. Effectively, is what they're talking about. We've got 100,000 children who disappeared during lockdown, who are no longer... I have to say, it's one of the good things in the white paper today is that Nadeem Zahawi said that actually they're going to have a register now for these 100,000 missing children, so any children who aren't in school. How we haven't got that already beggars belief. How do we help kids now? Because we've got catching up to do from the last 2 years.
Yeah, I also was a teacher for about 20 years before I got into politics. So I taught chemistry in a wide variety of schools. And, you know, it's quite shocking what they're saying here, that now only 65% of kids leave school. This is the basics they're talking about. Reading, maths, science. You know, it's not like advanced science, it's basic knowledge. You know, we should be at the top of the international PISA tables. We were in the top 5 in 2020. Now we're about number 15, number 16. You know, there's countries like Estonia and Slovenia are ahead of us. I mean, this is appalling. But we got the last 2 years has been absolutely terrible, of course, with children not getting a proper education.
You see, it doesn't add up, does it? Because if what Lee is saying is that we've got schools which are now exam factories, and all we're doing is we want grades because, of course, the schools ranking in terms of their exam results. But they're not even coming out with particularly good grades in that. So we're neglecting the pastoral care, we're neglecting their psychosocial well-being, but it seems like we're also not acing the academics. It's bleak, Lee. What do we do?
I think it's really bleak, and I think we've got to tackle a number of different things. So first of all, the disparity in education is massive. I mean, the bottom 20% in terms of poverty, so the poorest 20% of society, they're likely to get, only 21% of them get 5 good GCSEs. Gosh. And that's compared to 75% for the top 20% richest students. So the enormous class divide that underlies a lot of those students that are not attaining those good grades at GCSE, that's got to be addressed. And the way that we manage schools, I think, has also got to be addressed. Teachers have got to be empowered to teach. They've basically been turned into functionaries that just drill students in passing exams rather than active intellectuals cultivating knowledge. And we've got to stop holding teachers accountable for the grades their students get, which is only encouraging them to push this exam factory result. We need more qualitative judgment about how schools are doing, which is linked to the students that they're working with. So if they've got students from a poor background, they're going to need more resource and more time to work with those students to get them the results that they need.
Well, looking at the white paper today, the Education Endowment Foundation, which is a charity that advises the government on how to improve education, they're getting 100 million quid. Now, I think I could probably get 3 great head teachers in a room for much less than 100 million quid, and they could tell the government how to improve teaching. Why do we blow these huge amounts of money, Scarlett, on something that just sounds like an overbaked committee?
Well, I mean, it's completely mad, and actually Lee has given you the basics, and you listen to the head teachers. They absolutely know what they're doing. There are masses of great head teachers. But to come back to the class divide, which I think is really, really important, and nothing has been done about it, the biggest factor in that is the under-5s, right? Is that actually people go on about, you know, how much it costs to go to university, which is appalling, but and that poor people can't go to university. But actually much, much earlier in the under-5s is the deprivation, is whether what you're doing by the time you get into primary school makes the whole difference to the rest of your life. Yeah. And we should be really, really taking seriously the under-5s. We should go back to having children's centres that actually looked after the whole children. And again, didn't just try and teach them, but actually tried to help them, tried to help the parents. I mean, it is just crazy.
The Sure Start scheme.
Sure Start was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. And the first thing they did, the Conservatives did in austerity, was to kill Sure Start. And that killed the future for lots and lots of young children.
David, we're talking, thank you, Scott. We're talking about whether they've got the skills actually to go forward into the future. And for me, quite a lot of the time, GCSEs and A-levels, they're a memory test, aren't they? Can you learn this information? Can you retain it? Can you regurgitate it on paper and remember it? Is that a skill we don't really need anymore in the age of Google?
It's a really good thing for the people who are suited to that. So the academic course is good for people who are academic, but not all children are academic. You know, university is not the place for everybody. A lot of children would do better in technical schools where they learn, you know, plumbing and they learn electrical stuff and they learn all these kind of things. And students will be better off in a general school, leaving school at 16 and getting an entry-level job and then getting into the real world and earning some money between 16 and 20 and starting at the bottom and working their way up rather than trying to insist they stay in school until they're 18 and do resits and exams, which is not going to benefit from them at all.
Well, the World Economic Forum did a list. You might like this, Lee. Not that we looked to the World Economic Forum for advice. We try to avoid it where possible, right? But they, in 2015, they were saying that the skills that children are going to need for the future is complex problem solving, coordinating with others, people management, critical thinking, as you were saying. In 2020, very similar, but they're added onto it emotional intelligence, service orientation. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Being nice to people.
Is that right?
Being nice to customers, I would think.
Being willing to do what your boss tells you to do.
Yeah, this is what I was thinking. It looks like, for me, with the World Economic Forum, are asking us to create a generation of very compliant individuals. I'm not much of a fan of that, are you?
Well, to be honest, though, I mean, that is what schools have done, right? The reason why compulsory education was created in the context of the Industrial Revolution was to try to train a compliant workforce and also to instill values of discipline into the working class. I mean, that's well documented in the historical literature. But as for these skills, I mean, what's always hollowed out here, I think, is any sense of what it means to be a citizen, right? What are the sense of engagement, sense of community, sense of holding politicians to account, a valuing of democracy, participating in democracy? Do we want to just push those things to one side completely? It's no wonder the World Economic Forum doesn't talk about that.
Absolutely.
Also doesn't talk about knowledge. So, I mean, you say it's about regurgitating information, and I think that's right, that it is just about putting the information into the right box and then you get the right marks. But the education system as it stands does not encourage a deep knowledge of subject matter. It is very much focused around these kinds of soft skills.
Yeah. Well, yes. In fact, you've been in touch with us on socials. Thank you very much. And Steve's got in touch to say, doesn't anyone else find it strange that teachers find time to teach kids about critical race theory, net zero and transgender, but they don't have funds to teach them basic English and maths? And
I think that happens very rarely.
And Robert has said, too much text talk, too much using phones, a distraction. Our schools are farcical. I've seen and heard students at secondary schools not having a clue how to spell or add up even. We haven't even talked about the impact of tech, particularly on the younger generation's ability to concentrate on anything longer than a TikTok video. Right, thanks for that, guys. OK, coming up, the Chancellor has been in the Commons today defending his spring budget, as unsurprisingly, not many people are happy with it. As the cost of living crisis deepens, who is really responsible for the amounts that we pay? More on that after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Dewbs and Co. Just a reminder of who my panel are this evening. David Curtin, leader of the Heritage Party. Lee Jones is here, Professor of Political Economy and International Relations. And Scarlett Maguire, former Labour advisor. Now, love him or loathe him, Chancellor Rishi Sunak has been unavoidable this past week with the spring budget announcement and his grilling today by the Treasury Committee over whether he's done enough. And it raises several questions, not least about who is really responsible for the cost of living crisis. This is what Rishi Sunak had to say about his tax measures today.
Now, in terms of the individual measures and whether they're fair and progressive, I am very confident that they are. If you look at the two measures that were announced and legislated for in 2021 spring budget, the other measure in that budget was freezing the income tax personal allowances, which was widely recommended by a range of different people as being a progressive way to raise money. Just by nature of the income tax system, which is progressive, obviously freezing thresholds raises more money from those on higher incomes.
But is it fair to lay the blame solely at Rishi's feet? Ofgem has revealed huge regional divides across the UK on energy costs, with some areas having to pay double for bills. I don't know about you, but I feel that some businesses are already hitching up prices under the excuse that they have no choice. Scarlett, I'm going to come to you now. Do businesses have no choice right now? Have you noticed what I'm talking about?
Well, I mean, certainly petrol stations are not giving the 5p off. I mean, some of them quickly raised their prices so that they could lower them by 5p. And I think on average, they're saying that it's 3.7p each. So, I mean, a lot of businesses had a very, very tough pandemic. So I think one can't generalise, but certainly some are taking full advantage. And it's sort of, look away, it's Ukraine, look away, it's this, it's that, and we have to raise our prices. And others, I mean, it was quite interesting listening to the CEO of Iceland, where they deal with anybody, but they have a lot of people who are not very well off who go, and they say they're trying to keep their prices down because it's the only way they're going to sell. I mean, that's the other thing is that if you don't keep your prices down, you're not going to have any customers.
Unless we don't have a choice. I mean, this is what I am noticing, Lee. I don't know about you, but it feels like the prices are just going up everywhere. And when you say to somebody, blimey, that's more than last week, they go, well, you know, we're in a cost of living crisis. And first, it was Brexit was the first excuse, then COVID and lockdowns were the second excuse. And now it feels sometimes like the business owners are now using the current cost of living crisis and the war in Ukraine as an excuse.
I mean, you are right. I mean, this is totally anecdotal, but I was in a bar in central London recently, and one glass of wine cost £13.80, which the same wine you can buy 2 bottles of that in the supermarket. So, and you are right to notice what's going on. However, I would like to take a step back from the current issue and ask why a short-term hike in prices plunges so many households into crisis. So if we had a society in which wealth was more equally distributed, we wouldn't have a situation where so many people are living just on or just above the poverty line, so that a sharp increase in prices pushes them into crisis and people have then to choose between heating and eating. So if you look before the pandemic, you've already got 14.5 million people. It's over a fifth. It's over a fifth of the population living in what's called relative low income, the government measure of poverty, which is 60% below the median salary. We've already got over nearly 2 million people accessing food banks before the pandemic. So we have a problem of long-term economic stagnation, long-term stagnation in wages, and a situation where nearly half of households are in receipt of some kind of government benefit just to keep them afloat. So we're already in an incredibly fragile situation, and then we get a one-off inflationary spike because of all the lockdowns, and then loads of people are pushed into crisis. We should never have been in that situation in the first place.
Is it all Rishi's responsibility?
A lot of it is, because we should never have responded to COVID in the way that they did, with the lockdown, with spending £500 billion extra over the last 2 years. It's a basic economic principle. If you do that much quantitative easing, you create 25% more pounds, more currency units, the value of your currency unit is going to go down by 25%, and eventually that's going to feed into inflation. So a lot of people ask me, what would you do to stop it? How can we deal with this? And I've got to be honest and say, well, that's already happened. And there's nothing you can do to stop that amount of inflation sort of feeding through in the next couple of years. But what we shouldn't do is create more inflation and more quantitative easing. So you have to get back to balancing the budget, which is going to be difficult. But if we don't do that, that's going to create more pain and more hardship in the long term.
We've got a little graphic to explain a little bit about what's going on with this regional divide in terms of our fuel bills. So customers in South Scotland, Merseyside, North Wales, South West of England are seeing their daily payments double OK, that's me. I'm one of those, and my bill is actually going up by 50%. London and East England will increase less than 60%. Well, that's not me. I live in London. I clearly need to change my provider. And suppliers are increasing standing charges to the maximum for each region, causing huge jumps for certain areas. Now, this is the bit I don't understand. I can kind of understand if we've got a post-lockdown spike in demand for energy because everybody's suddenly producing again, and we've got the Russia and Ukraine war, which might be inhibiting supplies that we're getting over here. But Scarlett, shouldn't there be some way of making sure that these big energy providers are not also hiking up their standard charge?
Well, of course there should be. I mean, what is the point of having a regulator if they don't do the job? But also, what I don't understand is we knew in September that there was going to be a hike in energy prices. I mean, we talked about it. A lot of people worried about it. I'm sure, a lot of people had sleepless nights. It is now being blamed on Ukraine and Russia. It's been in the pipeline.
No pun
the pun
intended.
terrible.
Yeah.
For ages. I mean, of course, you just think, what is the point of we pretend to have regulators that don't regulate properly, and this awful thing of heating or eating, and you hear about pensioners. I mean, we've heard about it for years, particularly this winter. People who are not going to be able to heat themselves, to keep themselves warm. I mean, it is terrible. And it's actually, I mean, I think I probably completely disagree with David. What is the point of this country if we've got millions of people going to food banks, still not eating properly? We've got children going to school not having had breakfast. I mean, this is supposed to be one of the top economies in the world, and we're not doing it properly.
We deserve better, don't we, David?
Yeah, well, the energy is a specific situation. It's because of all this net zero nonsense. We closed down most of the coal power stations we've got, which was providing 25% of our energy 5 years ago, and that's absolutely ridiculous. We've got oil and gas in the North Sea which we could exploit and bring to the UK to provide cheaper energy, more plentiful energy, increase the supply, and then the price goes down. And we've got onshore shale gas. We should get going on that and developing that, and that's going to
I think we're going to hear Boris's strategy for energy, aren't we, later this week? Your pupils wouldn't like that, though, would they? Am I wrong? Am I stereotyping the young? They want net zero, don't they?
Well, I mean, my students, a lot of them are from working class backgrounds, and they're not.
They're not bothered.
They're not. I mean, they're not these kind of woke, blue-haired environmentalists that a lot of people make university students out to be. I think there's a lot of caricaturing of the young.
Good to know. I'm reassured, actually.
But just on this point about energy. I'm all for leadership in energy as long as it doesn't entail higher costs and rationing for the poor, which is often what these kinds of policies end up doing. So we shouldn't have shut down our gas-fired or our coal-fired power stations without having a new generation of nuclear-powered reactors being brought online, for example, which the government is now only very belatedly doing. But there is talk of this energy strategy being delayed. And that's because Rishi Sunak is, at heart, something of a Thatcherite, and he wants to balance the books, as David is saying. But there's no way that you can solve the problem of energy transition. There's no way you can solve the problems that I was talking about earlier on, about structural inequalities in the economy, about declining long-term growth rates and economic stagnation without major investment in the economy, without a proper incomes policy, without a proper industrial policy. And the state is going to have to lead on investing in these areas because the private sector has had a field day. They have lots of business-friendly regulations and they're not doing it. They're just driving stagnation.
But if I remember correctly, Maggie Thatcher, she basically shored up a load of coal, didn't she? She stored it knowing that she was going to close down the coal mines so that the miners were very weakened in their position at that point.
She did that in order to close down the coal mines.
But it seems like we just closed, we've stopped certain means of power, but we've not planned for the future.
No, and it was, to be clear about the coal mines, it was a political decision on the part of the Conservative government to close down the coal mines. There's lots of evidence of this now that has come out subsequently that with reforms, the coal mines could have been made economical. It was a decision to close down the coal mines because the mining union was too powerful. So they stored up the coal, as you say, they stockpiled it in order to defeat the miners' union, which laid a devastating blow to the organised working class, finished it off. Hence, then, she can push through her reforms. But since then, The idea is always about the state retrenching and retrenching, getting out of the economy, leaving it to the private sector. You ask about those disparities, about standing charges. That's because we privatised gas and handed it over to lots of privatised companies that make up their own policies. That's why there's that inequality. There is a solution to that. It's renationalisation.
Scarlett, what's your reaction to that? Renationalise it all?
Well, I certainly think you have to look at energy is too important to be left to the private sector. Energy.
Or even to another country's private.
Certainly to another country's state sector, which is what happens. But what always amazes me about energy with the private sector is you're supposed to choose which is the best tariff for you. Surely you should just be given the lowest possible. We should take energy really seriously. But as far as North Sea gas, shale, all of that, actually the energy, there is a worldwide energy crisis. It's not Britain. It's been absolutely shown that the price is not going to come down if we start fracking again. That isn't the answer. I am absolutely for renewables, and the first thing the Conservatives did was they took off the subsidy for it. So again, nobody was encouraged. New homes were not insulated. One of the problems for people is they live in. We are an amazing country of uninsulated homes.
Oh, couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
And new homes from 2010 did not have to be built properly insulated. So actually, it is about, I don't want to agree with Lee all the time, but it is about actually the state saying, this is what we have to do. Yeah. We're going to leave the private things to the private sector, but actually we have to have a baseline. And we don't at the moment.
Yeah. Do you agree, David?
Not entirely. The thing is, what we don't have at the moment is not fully privatised. It's because it's half privatised, but then you've got a regulator that sets prices, so they can't actually operate as a free market company.
They're making a lot of profit, though, right? They are some of the most profitable businesses in the country.
Yeah, right. Well, that's true, absolutely.
You mean energy companies?
So you've either got to do it one way or the other. You fully privatise it or renationalise it again. You could end up with better outcomes either way. I think. If the sort of quasi-market you've got a lot of energy companies that set up that don't produce any electricity, but they just trade in it and then they make the profits of that. And some of them have gone out of business. When the sort of prices went up and they got caught short with their contracts. So, they've got to sort this out. But there is plentiful energy in the UK. As I said, what we need to do in the short term is reopen the coal power stations. That would provide immediate support and immediately bring the prices down. In the medium term, then we got to do gas, and in the long term, nuclear. But there's no point in saying, we're going to do this now. It's not going to happen in 2 or 3 months. It's a long-term plan. And, these guys have been in power for 12 years, and they've done nothing for planning. They just made it worse and worse.
Feels a bit like that,
destroyed it all.
Well, you've been getting in touch, thank you very much, on Twitter at GBNews. Paul has said next month people will see how much our energy bills go up. Net zero means that everyone's energy bills will be triple that. What we're seeing now is just the start. And Colin has said the government are fully responsible for the financial mess. They can easily reduce inflation and other fiscal costs, as these are totally within their control to do so and no one else's. Remember, he has all-time high tax receipts. Well, he needs them, Colin. Right. We're moving on. Coming up, a charity has found in a survey that a third of children are worried about their family's financial situation, carrying on from what we've just been discussing, as the cost of living crisis worsens. Have we forgotten how to protect our children from adult worries? More on that next.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good evening, welcome back to Dewbs and Co with me, Bev Turner, just for tonight. A reminder of my brilliant panel this evening: David Curtin, leader of the Heritage Party, Lee Jones, Professor of Political Economy and International Relations, and Scarlett Maguire, former Labour advisor. Now, new research from charity Action for Children has discovered that a third of kids are currently worried about their family having enough money to get by as the cost of living crisis deepens. The charity also said that 2 years after the first national lockdown, mental health was now a much bigger worry for children, with less than a third of kids considering their own, with a third of kids considering their own mental health an issue, compared to 42% in 2022. The first figure was 2019. This comes after 2 years in which we told children they could kill their granny with a predominantly harmless pathogen and subverted millennia of evolution by suggesting they take a trial drug to protect their parents. So, David, I'm coming to you first, inevitably. Have we forgotten how to protect children from adult concerns, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, over the last 2 years, you've seen this incredible fear-mongering that's gone on the whole population. I mean, mostly targeted at adults, but it's filtered down into children as well. I mean, they can't help but be exposed to it because you see these advertisements everywhere saying, if you don't do this, you're going to kill your granny. And it was all absolute rubbish. You weren't. I mean, there was nothing really to worry about too much. And, you know, the financial worries that they talk about in the survey, of course, now we've got all that. People are talking about the cost of living crisis, and that's filtering down to children as well. And, you know, particularly in children from families, it says, with incomes of lower than 20,000, it's much greater than 30%. It's nearly 50% of kids between 11 and 18 are concerned about that there. I mean, in a way, it's good that they, you know, have some kind of understanding of finance and economics, and they can sort of think about it and make a plan. But it's really sad, you know, that this is filtering down when they should be allowed to have their childhood and just get on with life and, you know, play with their friends and do stuff that, you know, maybe other generations in the past would have done.
Yeah. Lee, do you agree? Has this got worse, or 'twas ever thus? Kids have always been worried.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's 2 points, I think. One is that if you grow up poor, you know you're poor, and you tend to worry about it, right? I think that has probably not changed very much. And this survey is only looking at the change and the impact of lockdown, really. Whereas I think you're right, it's always been this way. But I think there is also an issue where young people are being burdened increasingly, and sometimes quite deliberately, with the concerns that should properly be the concerns of adult citizens who have a responsibility to govern society and not children. And to pick up the issue we were talking about earlier on, about energy, for example, there was a survey done in 2020, and it found a fifth of children were losing sleep, or their eating habits have been affected because they're worried about climate change. Now, there's a deliberate attempt by climate change campaigners to reach out to children. We've seen the school strikes, for example, to try to activate children against their recalcitrant parents, basically. And that, I think, is really problematic, because this is an issue that has to be solved by adult citizens. It's not for children to solve. So I think, on the one hand, you know, if you grow up in poverty, you do worry about poverty. You know, I grew up poor, my family was poor. My grandmother had, 6 children, and she was widowed and had to work 3 jobs. Of course, her children worried about poverty. That's normal. That's really regrettable, and we need to solve poverty to alleviate these concerns. At the same time, we do need to be not trying to put our burdens onto children.
Yeah. What do you think, Scarlett?
I completely agree about being brought up poor, and I think one is very, very aware of what you can't do, and I think this myth that they should be out playing when actually there's very little that can be done, let alone the hunger, the not having the nice clothes, all of that. On the other hand, I mean, I think that the reason children care about climate change and the teenagers care about climate change, and I have to say both my children, my son is a climate change activist, is because it's real and because they're trying to do something about it. And I mean, I remember, when I was at school, we were terrified of nuclear war, right? And actually, this wasn't being encouraged by adults. The BBC had banned a film that we managed to see. So actually, the adult population were trying to stop it. And actually, it's about young people saying, it's our future, we want to do something about it. And I think that's fine. It is very, very worrying. I'm on the board of a charity called Open Door that deals with mental health problems in Haringey, and anybody can come. And we got the waiting list down just before the pandemic, and it is now it's back to months and months and months. It is really, really awful, that young people's mental health, and it's got to be taken very seriously.
Do we go a bit too far on the mental health, though, sometimes with children? So my just 13 this weekend came home and said, Mummy, they're just going on about mental health all the time. My mental health is fine. Will they stop telling me I should have a mental health problem? It's a difficult balance to get right, isn't it, with teenagers? Because we are coming off the back of a pandemic. They were very frightened unnecessarily, in my opinion. They are now hearing on the news all the time. We had GBNews on in the kitchen this morning on the radio, available on DAB, while I was making the porridge. And my 11-year-old heard a chat about inflation with Eamon and Isabel this morning, and she said, "What's inflation?" It sounded frightening. And I said, well, it just means you won't get as much for your money when you buy things in the shop. And she said, well, we'll be okay. And it was a genuine concern in the question. And I was able to say, we cut our cloth accordingly. We will buy what we can afford and we won't buy what we can't afford. Is that all you have to do, David? I mean, you were a teacher. Is that all you do with kids? You've got to somehow put it into perspective in a language they understand.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a teacher, I'd get all kinds of questions. Kids would talk about all kinds of things. And you just try to explain things, in a way that if they were worried, you might try to calm them down and so on. But, mental health is a sort of new catch-all phrase, but it's overblown. There's a whole load of specific clinical conditions that you can have, like anxiety disorder, depression, gender dysphoria, these kind of things. But the run-of-the-mill day-to-day things where you just might be worried about something you hear on the news or you have an argument with your friend, that's not a mental health issue. But all of these things are like, oh, that's mental health, and it's sort of overblown, and then people make a crisis out of it.
And we're pathologising normal emotions, aren't we, I think?
I have to say the people who come to my charity are not pathologising. I mean, they are people with serious anxiety. If you wait 3 or 4 months to see a therapist, it is serious. I mean,
How does that manifest itself, Scarlett? Help us to understand that a little bit more. Like, what would be the difference if you're at home now watching this and you've got a teenager who is just worried because exams are coming up and that's life, or something that is more problematic?
You can be cutting yourself. You can be refusing to go to school. There are serious. And we don't deal with the tops. We don't. I mean, if somebody's trying to commit suicide, they're going to go to A&E. They're going to go. So we have the middle. We have the sort of ones that David was actually talking about: the anxiety, the gender dysphoria, and it is serious. I mean, these are young people who find that they can't function. Actually, a year or two of therapy. And most of them are fine, right?
Gosh, it's a lot of money, though, isn't it? A year of therapy.
Well,
it's going to cost somebody money.
It costs somebody. I mean, people who come to us come for free. Yeah. But rich people, they don't come to us. They go private because they don't have to wait 4 months.
Lee?
Well, in my time teaching young people, we've seen an absolute explosion in referrals for mental health. And there's no doubt in my mind that younger people, for example, an 18-year-old coming to university today compared to when I started to teach in the mid-2000s, they are much more likely to suffer quite serious emotional distress that will impact on their studies. So, and I think there's two different things going on. I think the societal conditions in which they're growing up are a lot tougher. I'm so glad I didn't grow up with a smartphone.
Oh, I know.
I think smartphones are pure poison, and there's so
devil's
much
work.
research showing that it actually affects their intellectual and their emotional and their social development. And I think that's part of it. Wider societal concerns, I think, is making them much more difficult for them to mature and develop in the way that they should. And then I think there is this pathologizing element where various kind of social and emotional aspects of learning that have been promoted in schools do encourage students to think of themselves as suffering from some kind of mental disorder. And so instead of simply, as you say, maybe they're a little bit worried about their exams, but it becomes, oh, I'm anxious or I have anxiety. And so it's not an imaginary thing. You know, young people genuinely are presenting in huge numbers with these problems. We do have a crisis in society.
It's funny though, I mean, Christina's got in touch. Thank you, Christine. This is such a good point because you say far too much adult stuff is discussed by adults in front of children. These children are treated like mini adults but don't have the emotional skills to deal with it. Let children be children. I couldn't agree more. We've kind of forgotten that children are children. They're not mini adults to be exposed to all sorts of worries, haven't we, David? Why? How has that happened and why?
It's a very strange thing, isn't it? And, you know, I think you get people sometimes going into schools with an agenda. I mean, Stella there sort of mentioned... Scarlett, sorry, mentioned the gender dysphoria thing. You've got that exploding in the last 5 years, which is completely unnatural because beforehand there were a few people who had gender dysphoria, mostly boys, actually, rather than girls. And now it's exploded 4,000, 5,000% fold. I mean, and this is not normal. People have been going in and trying to teach people sort of gender ideology and groom people into accepting this. And this is like an adult sort of, ideology they're putting on children. And then children are suffering for this. I mean, just don't mention that to kids and they won't be suffering.
Hold on, David, this is not teachers going in and teaching. It's
outside agents.
No, it's outside agents. I mean, this is the big deal among teenagers at the moment, and they change. You have to ask what gender they want to be referred to as, or are they? And that's what's going on at the moment. But it's I think to blame, sort of outside people coming in is just crazy. That's what's happening. And sometimes for the most part, it's fine. It's just something that goes on, and for some people, it'll be a relief, a real relief that they can actually talk about it and think about it. And for others, it's quite dangerous.
Yeah, that is another debate for another time, though. I would really like to come back and have that with you, though. Trust me. OK, we do have to move on. This story might have broken overnight, but it is still leading all the news sites at the moment. So. Let's discuss this altercation between Oscar host Chris Rock and eventual winner of Best Actor Will Smith.
Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right? that was a nice one. Okay. I'm out here. Richard. Oh, wow. Wow. Will Smith just smacked the out of me.
I don't like it. I've seen that a million times today and I still don't like it. Well, if you've actually been at work today rather than looking at social media, Chris Rock pokes fun at Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett's G.I. Jane haircut, which is actually the result of her having alopecia. She rolled her eyes. Will Smith, who was initially laughing, walked on stage and whacked Rock across the chin. So, cue a million internet memes and a Twitter pile-on dividing the world on whether this was the behaviour of a chivalrous man protecting his wife's honour or a thin-skinned thug who lost his temper. Which is it? Who am I going to start with? David,
I would
go.
say something totally different. It is completely staged to me. And Will Smith is a veteran entertainer. He's been in the business for 40 years. He must know that doing something like that, after all the experience he's had in front of millions, billions of people, is going to end his career. I mean, and it's not. He got
why would he want to end his career? That would be a ridiculous thing to do.
I think it's staged, and the reason it's staged is because no one's talking about the Oscars much anymore. People have lost interest in Hollywood because it's so woke and it's it's a pit of degeneracy, basically. And it's basically now got everyone talking about the Oscars again. I mean, I'm talking about the Oscars for the first time in about 20 years.
But the irony is, of course, we're not talking about the Oscars. We're talking about all of the issues, the social issues, which are tied up into this one altercation, which is about toxic masculinity has been brought into this today. Is it right to take offence at a joke has been brought into this? Is it just some good old-fashioned sexism where you take the mickey out of what the woman looks like in a room of people? We've all been on the receiving end of that. You know, what do you make of it, Lee? Do you think it was staged?
Well, maybe. I mean, they are both actors, and the Oscars. You know, the watching figures for the Oscars has been declining year on year, and they're very desperate to reverse it. But I mean, I don't know. But I think it's fairly straightforward, and I'm sure most of your viewers would agree with this, that slapping somebody in the face for making an off-colour joke is not acceptable, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
And, you know, if an assault was conducted, well, let the police sort it out, and let's not talk about this anymore, because if it was staged to draw attention to it, then people are just doing what the stagers wanted.
No, we can't not talk about it anymore, Lee. You're here to talk about it, so don't... That's a terrible suggestion.
I'm not going to talk about it anymore.
Scarlett?
I just thought it was two people behaving incredibly badly. I think it was an appalling taste joke, given that Jada has alopecia, right? So you know, please, you can make jokes about all sorts of things, but not about the way women look when it's
I got the impression, because it was with affection. He was like, Jada, I love you. I got the feeling that they're friends, and maybe off camera around a dinner table, maybe she can laugh about it. Well, you know, she lives it, but he completely pitched it wrong. To do that in front of the world was terrible.
I mean, it was, and there's a question about whether there's a long-running dispute between Chris Rock and Will Smith. So I think Chris Rock did a really dreadful joke, and then Will Smith completely overreacted, and he shouldn't. And both of them behaved badly. And in the end, you know, I woke up and I thought, a bit of light relief, actually, from Ukraine.
Yeah,
I'm afraid.
You see, my feeling as well, David, is I saw it, and I know people who campaign for race equality and for black men to be viewed in a positive light in the public sphere. And I know they had their heads in their hands this morning saying, this should have been the night on which Will Smith was celebrated for being Best Actor and Chris Rock was a fantastic host of the Oscars. And instead, you've got two black men, one of whom is committing violence on the other. That's just disappointing, isn't it?
It's funny because I mean I didn't think about their colour at all. You know, to me it's Chris Rock, it's Will Smith. They're just people. I mean, I just see them as people.
The thing is, Black Lives Matter was trending on Twitter afterwards in a sarcastic way.
You know, sort of. You know, people would see that. Okay, that's two black men. Okay, whatever. If it was two white men, would it be different? If it was a white man punching a black man, I mean, if it was someone like that, they would be out on their ears straight away, wouldn't they? You know, if that had happened. But again, you know, I come back to the point. I think it's acting. I think it's staged. They're two veteran actors. They know how to act, and they wouldn't do that. They, you know, they're sensible guys. I mean, they do.
They are not sensible guys. What on earth are you talking about? I cannot sit here and let you defend him. Not at all. OK. Thank you, panel. David Curtin, Lee Jones, Scarlett Maguire. Thank you for having me. If you missed any of today's show, you can watch our previous episodes, download the Dewbs & Co podcast. Don't do that. It won't be me. That'll be Michelle. But do it, because it will be Michelle. It's available on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts from. I won't be back tomorrow. Michelle is going to be in just a moment, stepping in for Nigel Farage. See you soon.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern. Some parts of the UK have enjoyed 10 days of sunshine, but there'll be a lot more cloud over the next 24 hours and beyond. Showers in places as well, and feeling cooler on Tuesday before it turns colder Wednesday onwards. Arctic air is on the way. It's behind a cold front which is pushing into the north of Scotland during Monday night. Another front is moving up from the south to bring rain to southern counties of England overnight, and a few showers remain across northern England, southern Scotland as well. A lot of low cloud creeps in from the North Sea to affect parts of eastern and central England. So it's a cloudy start to Tuesday, but a mild start, 5 to 9 Celsius compared to what's to come. And then, as we go through Tuesday morning, showers continue to affect the south coast, and further outbreaks of rain will affect the north coast of Scotland. And this is a cold front that's coming south. It's going to bring some sleet and snow over the hills, but more significantly, a marked temperature drop for the Northern Isles with some sleet and snow showers here. compared with the milder air that hangs on elsewhere. Although with cloudier skies, it's certainly going to be cooler, 11 to 13 Celsius for England, Wales, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland. Into Tuesday night, showers affecting Scotland on the wintry side for the far north, but rain and hill snow predominantly for southern Scotland. Into Northern Ireland then by the end of the night, northern England, northern Wales as well as the Midlands. To the south, a lot of cloud once again, some mistiness first thing. And really that area of rain and hill snow divides the country during Wednesday morning. Much colder air with wintry showers for northern Scotland, northeast England during Wednesday. Some brighter skies though away from